Season 1 of The Wire introduces a large cast of characters living in the city of Baltimore. Homicide detective Jimmy McNulty discovers that drug dealer D'Angelo Barksdale is acquitted of murder and released back onto the streets, thanks in large part to the machinations of drug kingpin Stringer Bell and his shady lawyer Maury Levy. D'Angelo returns to work for his uncle Avon Barksdale, who alongside Stringer runs West Baltimore's corners selling dope. Avon is a much more classical kingpin, using violence and intimidation to enforce his power, while Stringer is focused on building a name for himself, taking business classes at night in an effort to turn their empire legitimate. Back on the street, D'Angelo is placed in charge of a low-rise housing project known as the Pit. Drug dealers under his employ include the teenagers Bodie, Poot, and Wallace. As D'Angelo does his best to mentor his workers and make a name for himself in the Barksdale organization, he also begins to grow disillusioned with his uncle's more violent and cutthroat actions. Detective McNulty grows frustrated with the police department's focus on making easy cases against low-level drug dealers to juice their numbers, instead of doing anything to address the real problem of Avon Barksdale. And so McNulty breaks the chain of command, going behind the backs of Homicide's Major Bill Rawls and Deputy Police Commissioner Ervin Burrell to seek out the help of Judge Faison to put pressure on the police department. And so, despite Rawls and Burrell's fury, a new police detail is formed to take down Avon Barksdale. The new detail is led by Lieutenant Cedric Daniels, who has a past of shady police work but a determination to right his wrongs and fight back against a system that cares more about politicking than actually helping the city. Working under Daniels and alongside McNulty are the quietly intelligent seasoned veteran Lester Freeman, ace narcotics detective Kima Greggs, whose girlfriend Cheryl constantly worries about the dangers of her job, impressive rookie Leander Sidner, perpetual screw-up Roland Presbeluski, who only has a job on the police force thanks to his father-in-law Stan Valchek being a respected police commander, and the best friends and partners Herc and Carver, who are used to the police system as it is, which encourages simple dope charges and a use of excessive force. During a night in the field, Herc, Carver, and Prez take their excessive policing too far, resulting in Prez blinding a teenager and being removed from field work. With the help of Assistant State's Attorney Rhonda Pearlman, who is also McNulty's secret friend with benefits, the detail is able to get the subpoenas necessary to place wiretaps on payphones frequented by the Barksdale crew. Under Daniels and Freeman's tutelage, Prez flourishes in the office, deciphering the criminal organization's various codes, helping the team build a very sound case that could potentially put Avon and Stringer away for a very long time. McNulty and Kima quickly realize they are like-minded detectives and form a bond as they work the case against Avon. Kima uses her drug-addicted and homeless confidential informant Bubbles to help gather intel on the Barksdale organization, while Bubbles takes fellow addict Johnny under his wings to teach him about life as a user on the streets. He also dreams of a clean life off the streets and working for the police full-time. Meanwhile, infamous stick-up man Omar Little begins robbing Avon's crews to steal their supply of drugs. In an act of revenge, Avon puts a bounty on Omar and his crew. When Wallace spots Omar's young boyfriend Brandon, Avon's crew torture and brutally murder Omar's lover, inciting a war between the two rivals. Upon seeing Brandon's mutilated body, Wallace becomes disillusioned with his place in the Barksdale organization and becomes resolved to return to school and leave behind his life of crime. D'Angelo supports Wallace's decision and allows him to quit selling drugs, but when Wallace is picked up and questioned by the police, Stringer and Avon grow suspicious. Despite making a deal with the police and moving out of Baltimore to live with his grandmother in peace, Wallace grows bored of this simple life and wishes to return home to rejoin the drug game. Stringer remains suspicious of Wallace and orders his friends Bodie and Poot to murder him, which they tragically do. This act devastates D'Angelo and inspires him to also leave behind his life of crime. McNulty and his homicide partner / drinking buddy Bunk Moreland manage to turn Omar into their informant to gather intel on the Barksdale organization. As the battle between Omar and Avon erupts into further violence, Omar is forced to flee Baltimore to regroup. As Daniels' detail gathers more and more evidence against the Barksdale organization, they start to receive pressure from Burrell to act faster. This forces Daniels to send Kima undercover to perform a buy-bust, but unfortunately the plan goes wrong, with Avon's main soldier Weebay opening fire on Kima and nearly taking her life. The entire detail is left distraught over Kima's near death, and the police department pushes harder for Daniels' team to make showy, newsworthy arrests. When Daniels is given orders to raid Barksdale stash houses they've been monitoring, he realizes that Carver has been a mole in the unit for Burrell and is forced to carry out the raids. The minor victory is celebrated by the police higher-ups in the media, but Daniels knows that the raids have also blown their wiretaps and cost them any chance of charging Avon or Stringer with anything serious, along with ruining their chances at following the potential high-ranking political connections, like a corrupt senator named Clay Davis, that are tied to the Barksdale organization. Daniels and McNulty try to take the Barksdale connections with political figures to the FBI, who are only willing to pursue the case if the drug dealers are used as pawns and not the targets, frustrating Daniels and McNulty and forcing them to abandon their planned FBI partnership. Ultimately, Avon and D'Angelo are arrested on minor charges, with Stringer completely off the hook. The arrests are celebrated, but Daniels, McNulty, and the rest of the detail see this hollow victory as more of a defeat. Still distraught over Wallace's death, D'Angelo refuses to allow his family to help him, and instead offers to cooperate with the police and give up everything he has on Avon. Unfortunately, Avon's sister and D'Angelo's mother, Brianna, remains loyal to Avon and convinces D'Angelo to keep quiet against his better morals and judgment. And when Wee-Bey is arrested for Kima's shooting and willingly takes the blame for crimes he didn't even commit, Avon's charges are made even more minor, resulting in being sentenced to 7 years in prison, while D'Angelo is sentenced to 20. As the season comes to a close, the detail is disbanded, with Daniels being passed over for promotion due to his attempt to take the Barksdale case federal, while a spiteful Rawls assigns McNulty to the dregs of the Marine unit. Carver is promoted by Burrell for his role as a snitch in Daniels' unit, while Freeman's valuable police work earns him a spot as Bunk's new partner in the homicide division. And the Barksdale organization remains in power, just with a different leadership structure, as Poot takes over the pit, Bodie is promoted to the towers, and the calculating businessman Stringer Bell oversees it all. You know, if Omar ever comes for you, you're gonna need the perfect shoe to get away. Something easy to slip on, super comfortable, versatile in any environment, and with a cool and stylish look. And that's where this video's sponsor Vessi comes in. Vessi has all of the great qualities you're looking for in an everyday shoe, but with the incredible bonus of being 100% waterproof. If you're like me, you sit at a desk all day working, and when you're finally done, there's nothing worse than going outside and seeing that it's raining. But with Vessi's 100% waterproof shoes, you can be confident and ready to welcome the water. Rain, no problem. Puddles, no problem. Spilling your drink on yourself because you're clumsy, no problem. I genuinely love my Vessis. They're my go-to everyday shoe. And personally, I also think they make the perfect travel shoe. They look nice so they can go with pretty much any style or outfit. They're comfortable and lightweight so your feet won't be hurting from all the walking and sightseeing. And the waterproofing makes it so that you can feel comfortable and at ease no matter what the weather turns out to be. So if you want your feet to look cool, feel good, and never experience soggy socks again, try Vessi. You can check out all their styles at vessi.com/recapchill, and if you use code RECAPCHILL at checkout, you'll get 15% off your order. Thanks to you guys for checking out my links and discounts to support this channel, and thanks to Vessi for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the recap. In Season 2 of The Wire, Stringer Bell finally has the chance to run the Barksdale organization exactly how he wants, with the imprisoned Avon's more narrow-minded thoughts pushed aside for a more ambitious expansion. When the crew's drug supply falls in quality, Stringer makes a deal with East Baltimore's rival gang leader Proposition Joe to sell his product in exchange for giving up some of their most valuable corners. And when Stringer grows concerned that D'Angelo will become a snitch in prison, Stringer goes behind Avon's back and secretly has him murdered, with his death staged as self-inflicted. Unaware of Stringer's moves behind his back, the imprisoned Avon orchestrates infamous hitman Brother Mouzone to scare off Prop Joe's crews. Wanting to repair his relationship with Prop Joe, Stringer further betrays his partner Avon by making a deal with their rival Omar Little, lying to Omar that Brother Mouzone was responsible for his lover Brandon's torture and murder. Stringer offers a truce between Omar and the Barksdale organization if Omar murders Brother Mouzone. But when Omar attempts to kill his target, Mouzone reveals that Stringer is a liar, leading to Omar sparing Mouzone and swearing his revenge against Stringer. Meanwhile, Major Stan Valchek finds himself in a petty battle with Stevedore Union leader Frank Sabatka. Despite having no evidence of Frank being involved in any serious crimes, Stan uses his position in the police force to form a new squad to investigate the Stevedores and take down Frank. Stan tasks his son-in-law Prez with assembling the unit, and Prez brings along many of his old friends and colleagues, including Daniels, Freeman, Kima, Herc, and Carver. Daniels, who has considered leaving the police force to pursue a career as a lawyer, only agrees to join with the promise that this detail will be turned into a permanent major crimes unit under his command, should they end the case in success. Daniels' commitment to good police work over being more politically savvy causes a strain in his marriage to ambitious councilwoman Marla, leading to the two getting a divorce. Meanwhile, McNulty, now working the Marine unit, finds a dead body in the harbor that he connects to a shipping container found on the docks containing the bodies of several women who were being illegally trafficked into the country. The patrolling officer B.D. Russell, who discovered the bodies in the container, is pulled into the investigation and taken under the wing of Daniels and his unit, who now must determine what, if any, connection Frank Sabatka has to the dead women found on his dock. Meanwhile, the good-intentioned Frank Sabatka is struggling in his role as union leader to secure jobs and keep his men employed. His failing financial situation leads him to an uneasy alliance with a mysterious man known only as the Greek, who does all of his communication via his right-hand man Vondis. The Greek tasks Frank with helping smuggle illegal products into Baltimore, including Proposition Joe's drug supply. Frank's wildcard son Ziggy and ambitious nephew Nick begin working closer with Vondis and the Greek to make some money of their own. Ziggy's embarrassing recklessness eventually has him cast aside by the Greek, but Nick proves himself to be a useful soldier and quickly moves up the ranks. As Ziggy is forced to work on his own and grows more erratic, he eventually snaps and murders one of the Greek's associates, Gleekis, for slighting him. Feeling immediately remorseful, Ziggy turns himself over to the police. Daniel's unit quickly realize that Frank is a minor player and therefore divert their attention to taking down the Greek. Faced with a failed marriage and a dead-end position in the Marine unit, McNulty falls into a heavy drinking problem and hits rock bottom. Fortunately, McNulty's old pals Bunk and Freeman are able to convince their boss Rawls to forgive McNulty and allow him to rejoin Daniel's unit. As the team use wiretaps and surveillance to definitively connect the Greek to drug smuggling and human trafficking, Herc and Carver grow resentful that they are constantly relegated to grunt work, while Valchek becomes furious that their attention has moved away from his rival Frank. Valchek brings in the FBI to take over the case and demands his son-in-law Prez quit the detail. Prez stands up for his colleagues and their good police work and punches his father-in-law in the face. With the FBI now involved, Daniels and his team are forced to act immediately against the Stevedores and the Greek, leading to a massive coordinated raid. Although they arrest Frank and Nick, a corrupt FBI agent informs the Greek of the raids, giving the real targets the chance to destroy all evidence of their crimes and escape. Frank agrees to work with the police to find and take down the Greek in exchange for leniency for Nick and Ziggy. Meanwhile, Nick convinces Vondis and the Greek that Frank can be trusted, and the Greek prepares to use his connections to have Ziggy cleared of Gleekis' murder. And so Frank abandons his plan to become an informant and agrees to make a deal with the Greek. Unfortunately, the Greek learns of Frank's involvement with the police, and due to a lack of trust, is forced to have Frank murdered. Everyone is devastated by Frank's death, and the police agree to put Nick and his family into witness protection. Meanwhile, the Greek, who it turns out isn't even actually Greek, flees Baltimore to continue his empire elsewhere. Despite losing the Greek, Daniel's detail is considered a success and officially made a permanent major crimes unit. The disgruntled Herc and Carver quit the unit to join a unit in the Western District, while Daniels is able to convince Valchek to allow Prez to keep his job. As the season comes to a close, McNulty considers pursuing a relationship with Beatty, but realizing his own self-destructive tendencies, chooses to instead remain fully dedicated to his police work. And that work would now see the major crimes unit fully dedicated to taking down their next target, the growing in power Stringer Bell. In Season 3 of The Wire, the Major Crimes Unit continues trying to build their case against Stringer Bell with little luck. The recently divorced Daniels begins openly dating Rhonda Pearlman, creating some slight awkwardness around the office between them and Pearlman's former hookup partner McNulty. As McNulty continues his drunken escapades with Bunk, he also begins teaching Kima his philandering ways. Kima grows resentful of her partner Cheryl's attention to their newborn baby and regrets ever even having a child, leading her to cheat on Cheryl using McNulty's cover stories before ultimately ending their relationship. Prez has further proved himself as a valued member of the team, but when he accidentally shoots and kills a fellow detective in the field, he realizes that he is not meant to be a police officer and leaves the force. The long-imprisoned Dennis Cuddy Wise is finally released and forced to adjust to a new life as a free man. Formerly a legendary enforcer for Avon, Cuddy resists his old friend's offer to set him up with a job and instead decides to leave his life of crime behind him. Cuddy takes a strenuous landscaping job to make money and opens a boxing gym to help train local kids in the community. The MCU's efforts to take down Stringer are thwarted by his pivot into becoming a legitimate businessman. With Avon in prison, Stringer is given full control of their organization. He places the enforcer Slim Charles in charge of the day-to-day drug business, while he devotes his time to investing his money with wealthy benefactors and politicians, like the corrupt Senator Clay Davis. Stringer also forges an alliance with rival kingpin Prop Joe, and the two form the New Day Co-op, in which every local drug leader that joins is a part of a wide-reaching alliance. Business thrives under Stringer's leadership, but all of that is put in jeopardy when Avon Barksdale is finally released from prison. Avon is a more classical gangster and resists Stringer's business moves, alliances, and investments in favor of muscling out their competition. Avon's violent nature escalates when a new drug kingpin named Marlowe Stanfield hits the streets and starts stealing corners and refusing to join the co-op. To make matters worse for Stringer, McNulty finally learns of D'Angelo's death in prison and realizes that the man was murdered. As McNulty starts planting doubt of D'Angelo's death in the minds of his girlfriend and mother, Stringer is forced to confess to Avon his part in his nephew's death. Avon accepts Stringer's reasoning, but their relationship is irreparably damaged. Meanwhile, Herc and Carver join the Western District Squad under the command of Major Bunny Colvin. Bunny is nearing retirement and, with nothing to lose, devises a plan that he thinks will create a real change in Baltimore. Essentially legalizing drugs, Bunny's plan moves drug dealers off of public street corners and into a sanctioned area of vacant houses. This greatly reduces drug-related crimes in public areas and gives his officers time to do more actual police work over simple street rips. The designated free zone is dubbed Hamsterdam by the local dealers and users, who are at first suspicious of the plan, but eventually take full advantage of it. Bubbles tries to start up his own business in Hamsterdam, while his partner Johnny succumbs to his addiction and overdoses. Bunny's officers, who are sworn to secrecy from exposing the plan to the higher-ups like Rawls and Burrell, are much more resistant to the idea. Under Bunny's mentorship, Carver grows into a respectable detective who cares more about protecting and serving than bashing heads. But Herc is stuck in his old problematic ways and leaks the details of Hamsterdam to the press. Meanwhile, City Councilman Tommy Carcetti has aspirations to become the new mayor of Baltimore. To unseat the current mayor Royce, Carcetti begins enacting his plan to implement radical change throughout the city. He puts pressure on the newly promoted Commissioner Burrell and Deputy Commissioner Rawls to reduce crime at any cost. Upon the revelation of Hamsterdam making national headlines, Carcetti capitalizes on the bad press to throw Mayor Royce under the bus. Bunny is demoted and fired and receives less pension than his contract promised. Hamsterdam is shut down, much to the dismay of Bunny and Carver, and the dealers return to their corners, same as it ever was. When Stringer discovers that Clay Davis has been conning him and swindling him of large sums of money, he angrily asks Avon to assassinate the senator, which Avon refuses. Meanwhile, Avon grows closer to his enforcer Slim Charles, and the two continue to escalate their war against Marlowe Stanfield. Fearing that Avon's recklessness will destroy their empire, Stringer goes to Bunny Colvin, infamous for creating Hamsterdam, and snitches on Avon in the hopes of having him arrested. Stringer then further discusses the assassination of Clay Davis on a phone call with one of his enforcers, in a rare act of his own recklessness that the MCU records on the wire, giving them the evidence they needed to finally arrest Stringer Bell. But it's not just the police that are after Stringer, as Omar Little and Brother Muzone forge an uneasy alliance after discovering that Stringer had tried to manipulate them both into killing each other. To keep the peace with Muzone, Avon reluctantly gives his blessing to kill Stringer. And so, before the police can act, Omar and Muzone find Stringer and execute him. McNulty is devastated by the fact that Stringer died before ever knowing that he had been caught. Avon's crew assume that Marlowe was behind Stringer's death, and they prepare for all-out war. The MCU receives Stringer's intel from Bunny, and alongside the Western Squad, raid the Barksdale compound. Avon and many of his soldiers, including Poot, are arrested, leaving the streets open for Marlowe's taking. As the season comes to a close, Daniels is promoted to Major and given command over the Western District. McNulty realizes that his self-destructive nature can't be fixed by police work and decides to make a real change. He leaves the MCU to become a simple patrolling officer in the Western District and begins a simple domestic romance with Beatty. In Season 4 of The Wire, Marlowe Stanfield and his crew have completely taken over Baltimore's west side. Prop Joe finally convinces Marlowe to join the co-op, while Bodie now reluctantly works a corner selling Marlowe supply, and Marlowe's enforcers, Chris and Snoop, murder anyone that stands in their way, using a nail gun to hide their bodies in vacant houses that the police never uncover. With a lack of dead bodies to pin on Marlowe, the MCU is completely gutted by new Deputy Commissioner Rawls. He installs Lieutenant Marimo as the new boss, who in turn completely shuts down their Marlowe Stanfield investigation in favor of returning to the basic street busts. Frustrated by Marimo's actions, Freeman and Kima transfer from the MCU to Homicide. Meanwhile, 4 teenagers from West Baltimore struggle to grow up in a system that is rigged against them. Michael is the leader of the group, a natural fighter and protector of his friends and younger brother Bug. Randy is an optimistic foster kid with an entrepreneurial spirit. Dookie is constantly bullied by other kids due to his lack of hygiene, caused by abusive, drug-addicted parents who steal every single thing he owns. And then there's Namond, an all-bark, no-bite wannabe gangster, and the son of the incarcerated Weebay. When Weebay and his wife Delonda are cut off from the Barksdale money, Namond's parents pressure him to follow in his father's footsteps and claim a corner for himself. The 4 friends frequent Cuddy's boxing gym, where Michael proves himself to be a natural fighter. Despite Cuddy's efforts to train and mentor Michael, the kid is resistant to any of Cuddy's offers, due to Cuddy's selfish behavior of sleeping with the mother of every one of his students, and of Michael's own past history of sexual abuse at the hands of Bug's now imprisoned father. Michael's leadership qualities also attract the attention of Marlowe Stanfield and his right-hand man Chris. At first, Michael resists Marlowe's offer to join his crew, but when Bug's father comes home from prison, Michael seeks out Chris's help in killing his abuser. The similarly abused Chris murders Bug's father and takes Michael under his wing, teaching him how to kill and never be abused again. Now officially working for Marlowe, Michael has enough money to buy his own apartment for himself, Bug, and Dookie to live in. When the 4 friends return to Edward Tillman Middle School in the fall, their math teacher is none other than Roland Presbolewski, whom they all nickname Mr. Presbo. Prez wants to make a real impact on his students' lives, and becomes frustrated with having to constantly go up against a school board that cares more about test scores and government funding than ensuring that their students are actually learning anything. Throughout the school year, Prez develops unconventional teaching methods that the kids engage with, bankrolls Randy's candy selling business, and takes Dookie under his wing, bonding over their shared love of technology and supplying him with fresh clothes and other necessities. Also attending Edward Tillman is Sherrod, a young drug addict that Bubbles mentors but wants to help push away from a similar fate as Johnny. Sherrod quickly drops out of school and falls back into his addiction, much to Bubbles' dismay. The now retired Bunny Colvin takes a new job working as a researcher for the University of Maryland's study on repeat violent offenders. Bunny suggests the research be focused on kids before they're too far gone, leading to them forming their own class at Edward Tillman, featuring the most disruptive and at-risk students. Namond is one of the students selected for the class, and under Bunny's mentorship, his well-meaning and caring nature is nurtured out over his false gangster bravado. Despite the research study eventually being shut down for good, Bunny is able to convince Weebay to look out for his son's best interest, resulting in Bunny becoming Naaman's official legal guardian. Carver continues to work in the Western District, utilizing all of the skills imparted on him by his former boss Bunny. Carver makes a genuine connection to the kids in the district and forms a friendship with Cuddy over their shared concern for the kids' welfare. Meanwhile, Herc is now working in Mayor Royce's security detail, hoping it will lead to a swift promotion. And when Herc accidentally catches Royce in the midst of an inappropriate sexual act, the mayor has Herc promoted to sergeant and sends him back to the MCU. Herc and Sydnor are the only original detectives still at the MCU, and they constantly clash with Marimo's orders. Taking matters into his own hands, Herc goes behind Marimo's back and uses a police camera to spy on Marlowe and his crew, attributing any evidence he collects to a made-up informant. When Marlowe finds and steals the camera, Herc becomes desperate to get it back to save his career. First, he interrogates Randy on a murder he suspected was connected to Marlowe, then fails to properly protect Randy despite Carver's insistence. When word gets back to Marlowe that Randy spoke with the police, the kid is labeled a snitch and violently harassed and attacked, forcing him back into a group home where he is brutally assaulted by the other kids, devastating Carver. Next, Kima entrusts Bubbles to Herc as a CI. Bubbles promises to help Herc recover the camera in exchange for Herc arresting a violent man who constantly attacks and robs Bubbles. But Herc's selfishness leads to him frequently abandoning Bubbles in his time of need, prompting Bubbles to call in a fake tip and having Herc mistakenly arrest an innocent and highly regarded black minister. With Herc proving to be of no help to him, Bubbles is forced to take matters against his attacker into his own hands. He creates a mix of heroin and cyanide that he intends to have his attacker steal from him and poison himself with. But when Bubbles and Sherrod reconcile, Sherrod unknowingly takes the poison himself and dies. Bubbles is devastated by Sherrod's death and finally hits rock bottom. Meanwhile, Omar and his new boyfriend Ronaldo move on from robbing the now defunct Barksdale crew to the thriving Stanfield crew. When Marlowe seeks revenge against Omar, Chris orchestrates framing him for robbing a store and murdering an innocent security guard. When Omar finds himself in prison surrounded by dealers and gangsters he had previously robbed, he realizes that it is only a matter of time before they all enact their revenge. Omar seeks out the help of Detective Bunk Moreland, who trusts Omar's story and goes against his fellow detectives to prove the stick-up man's innocence. In return, Omar swears to Bunk that he will never murder again. Upon his release, Omar and Ronaldo seek their own revenge against Marlowe, robbing Prop Joe's entire shipment of heroin from the Greeks in a massive score. Omar sells the drugs back to Prop Joe and gives a portion of his money to his father figure and mentor Butchie, then retires with Ronaldo to Puerto Rico. Marlowe and the other co-op leaders are furious about the robbery and plan their revenge to rid themselves of the infamous Omar Little for good. Elsewhere, Tommy Carcetti defeats Royce to become the new mayor of Baltimore. Carcetti wants to enact real change in the city and wants to start with bolstering the police department and cleaning up the streets. He promises significant raises to all officers and promises a new day has arrived. Carcetti also takes a liking to Cedric Daniels in his effort to focus on building cases for quality arrests over a simple stat-based method. Carcetti promotes Daniels to commander of the Criminal Investigations Division, with an eye on one day making him the police commissioner. In turn, Carcetti makes moves to fire the old-school Burrell as the current commissioner. Burrell uses his connections with corrupt Senator Clay Davis, City Council President Nerese Campbell, and the influential black ministers to make his firing difficult, then proves his usefulness to Carcetti by helping him navigate the public scandal of Herc mistakenly arresting the black minister, leading to Herc's firing. From his new position of power, Daniels removes Marimo from the MCU and tasks Freeman with rebuilding the team to take down Marlowe Stanfield. And when Freeman discovers Chris and Snoop's methods of hiding bodies and vacants, the dead bodies start quickly adding up. Jimmy McNulty becomes inspired by Carcetti's promise of a new day and attempts to get closer to his old former frenemy Bodie, in the hopes of turning him into an informant against Marlowe. But when Marlowe's crew see Bodie talking with a police officer, they murder him, and Michael is officially placed in charge of his corner. Prez is devastated to see his protege Dookie fall in line to work the corner alongside Michael, while McNulty is devastated by his hand in Bodie's death, and finally rejoins the MCU to to take down Marlowe once and for all. As the reformed MCU gain a renewed hope for the future, the newly elected Mayor Carcetti discovers that Baltimore schools face a $54 million budget deficit. Carcetti's right-hand man Norman encourages him to accept a bailout from the governor of Maryland, but Carcetti doesn't want to accept the money, as it might negatively impact his future aspirations of running for governor himself. And so Carcetti turns down the money for his own self-interest, putting the city of Baltimore in a worse predicament than ever. In season 5 of The Wire, Mayor Carcetti's selfish aspirations to become the governor of Maryland have turned him into the exact type of politician he promised to save Baltimore from. With the city's money going toward the schools, Carcetti is forced to make drastic cuts to the police department, destroying morale and forcing the shutdown of the Major Crimes Unit and their case against Marlowe Stanfield. Amidst the police budget cuts, Carcetti is able to successfully remove Burrell as police commissioner, naming Rawls as interim commissioner, and eyeing Daniels as his eventual permanent successor. Meanwhile, Marlowe is taken fully under the wing of Prop Joe, who teaches him how to put all of his newfound wealth to good use. Prop Joe introduces Marlowe to the lawyer Maury Levy and helps him launder his money in an offshore bank account. But Marlowe grows restless being just another member of the co-op and has his eyes on being crowned the true king of Baltimore. Marlowe discovers that Prop Joe buys his drug supply from the Greeks and secretly makes a deal using his newly laundered money to take over as their new buyer. With no more use for Joe, Marlowe convinces Joe's nephew Cheese to betray him, then has Chris murder him. Marlowe then assumes full control of the co-op, where he immediately disbands their regular meetings and raises the price of the supply for everyone. Despite his machinations to become the new head of Baltimore's drug scene, Marlowe hasn't forgotten his vendetta against Omar Little. Marlowe tasks Chris and Snoop with luring the former stick-up man out of retirement and killing him, and so Chris and Snoop find Omar's mentor Butchie and torture and murder him. Upon learning of Butchie's death, Omar returns from his tropical retirement to enact revenge of his own. But Omar is blinded by rage and becomes reckless, thinking he can take on the entire Stanfield organization by himself. After a violent shootout that results in Omar breaking his leg, the once legendary killer becomes crippled and desperate, hobbling through the streets of Baltimore, murdering random Stanfield soldiers, and begging for Marlowe himself to show his face. But Omar never gets the confrontation he desires, as young corner kid Kennard easily murders the unsuspecting Omar, giving a sad, abrupt ending to the once living legend. Meanwhile, Michael continues to train as a soldier under Chris and Snoop. At home, he pays his friend Dookie to be his younger brother Bug's primary caretaker, while in the street he begins to voice his regrets over the violent acts he is forced to commit. As State's Attorney Bond attempts to prosecute the corrupt Senator Clay Davis, he convinces Carcetti to give the resources of 2 detectives to look into Davis's history of corruption. And so Lester Freeman and Leander Sidner remain as the only members of the MCU and are assigned to follow Davis's money trail. Lester and Sidner uncover massive amounts of evidence that could take the case federal, but Bond dismisses key evidence in order to keep the case local, so that he can personally take down Clay Davis and use the victory for his own political aspirations. Unfortunately, the smooth-talking Clay Davis charms the local jury and is acquitted of all crimes, frustrating everyone involved and humiliating Bond. Jimmy McNulty is devastated by the abandonment of the Stanfield case and falls right back into his alcoholism and infidelity. Desperate for a way to get the resources and attention needed to take down Marlowe, McNulty begins staging random homeless deaths and overdoses as the work of a serial killer. McNulty hopes that the public attention of a supposed serial killer will force Carcetti to give the police department the budget they require. Bunk is appalled by his best friend and former partner's actions, but when Lester learns of McNulty's scheme, he gladly joins in, similarly obsessed with bringing down Marlowe. The two are forced to escalate their staged murders when no one at first cares, resorting to placing bite marks on the victims and faking the kidnapping and hostage situation of a homeless man, when in actuality he was just dropped off by McNulty in a neighboring city. Eventually, McNulty fakes a call from the killer to reporter Scott Templeton at the Baltimore Sun, landing the story of the serial killer on the front page of the local paper. With his campaign for governor imminent, Carcetti is forced to give the police department all of the resources necessary to bring down this supposed serial killer as quickly as possible. McNulty and Lester are ecstatic about their success, using their newfound resources to instead focus on taking down Marlowe. At the Baltimore Sun, desk editor Gus Haynes is trying to do good and respectable journalism in the face of massive budget cuts and bosses who would rather have sensationalized stories that are more reader and award friendly. Gus begins growing suspicious of New Sun reporter Scott Templeton, who secretly fabricates details and quotes to create better narratives. Scott becomes obsessed with the attention he receives for being the reporter contacted by the killer, and begins fabricating his own details to embellish his own importance. McNulty is shocked and amused by Scott's lies, but the further media attention only helps to funnel more money into his secret Marlowe Stanfield investigation. When Scott crafts a false story about a homeless veteran, the Sun editors love it and believe it could win them all Pulitzers. Gus pushes back on the story, arguing against its fabrications, but his bosses would rather win the Pulitzer than retract the false story. And so Gus is demoted while Scott is lauded and awarded. Meanwhile, fellow Sun reporter Mike Fletcher does a bit of honest journalism and reports on the story of Bubbles, who has remained clean and sober while living in his sister's basement, though still beating himself up over the death of Sherrod. With the help of his sponsor Waylon, Bubbles is finally able to forgive himself, as does his sister, who allows him to leave the basement and finally rejoin the family he so desperately missed. As the lead detective on the serial killer case, McNulty secretly gives away some of his newfound resources to his fellow detectives to allow them to work their own cases, while he and Lester continue to work on bringing down Marlowe. When Sidner discovers the fake plot, he reluctantly becomes the third member of the renegade team. When Kima is forced to neglect her real casework to focus on the fake serial killer, a guilty McNulty divulges his secret plan to her, realizing that it has spiraled out of his control. Meanwhile, Bunk forges ahead with some good old-fashioned honest police work as he tries to connect the Stanfield organization to the many bodies found in the vacants. Bunk eventually uses DNA evidence to tie the murdered body of Michael's stepdad to Chris Partlow, but McNulty pleads with him to hold off on any arrest until he and Lester can bring down Marlowe too. The disgraced former cop Herc is now working as a private detective for the shady lawyer Maury Levy. Upon discovering that Marlowe is Levy's newest client, Herc steals Marlowe's cell phone number and gives it to Carver, as retribution for his errors in dealing with the young Randy Wagstaff. Carver gives the number to Lester, who then places an illegal wiretap on Marlowe. Lester and Sidner eventually crack Marlowe and his crew's secret codes, leading them to raid the Stanfield crew as they resupply their drugs from the Greeks. The raid is a massive success, celebrated extensively in the media by Carcetti, leading to the arrest of Marlowe, Chris, and Cheese. Lester claims the information from the illegal wiretap actually came from a secret informant. Unsure of who snitched on them, Marlowe and Chris reluctantly conclude that it may have been Michael, and give Snoop the order to murder him. But Michael has learned well from Chris and Snoop and sees his imminent death coming. Instead, Michael murders Snoop and flees with Bug and Dookie. Michael places his little brother in the care of their aunt before sharing an emotional goodbye with his best friend. Herc becomes bitter over not joining in the success for his part in Marlowe's arrest, and tips off Levy that a wiretap may have been involved, an act that finally and fully sells Herc's morals to the devil. With this knowledge, Levy threatens attorney Rhonda Pearlman that he could have the entire case against Marlowe dismissed. Fortunately, Lester supplies Rhonda with information that Levy was paying an informant inside the courthouse to illegally obtain sealed documents. Using this as leverage, Levy and Pearlman negotiate a life sentence for Chris, the release of Cheese on bond, and the release of Marlowe on the condition of him getting out of the drug game for good. Feeling convicted over her knowledge about the fake serial killer, Kima informs Daniels about McNulty and Lester's lies. A furious Daniels brings this revelation to Rawls and Carcetti, who are despondent over how to proceed. proceed. Admitting the serial killer to be a hoax from within their own police department would bring embarrassment to the entire city and ruin their very public victory against the Stanfield organization. Carcetti reluctantly decides to keep the hoax quiet, and Daniels goes along with the lie in order to protect his love Pearlman from any career consequences of her own. McNulty stays a detective for the duration of the serial killer case, with the intent of letting the story die down in the public eye before he is quietly fired. Unfortunately, a new copycat killer emerges, killing 2 new homeless victims. McNulty quickly catches the new killer, and Rawls does his best to tie all of the fake killings to the mentally unwell copycat killer in the media. In the end, Carcetti is elected governor of Maryland, bringing along Rawls as the new superintendent of state police. Carver follows in Daniels' footsteps, overcoming an early career of bad police work to become a highly respectable lieutenant. Daniels becomes fed up with the state of the Baltimore Police Department and retires with dignity, becoming a defense lawyer and sharing the courtroom with his love, the new judge Rhonda Pearlman. Detective Sidner becomes the new McNulty, complaining to Judge Phelan about the higher-ups obstructing his investigations. Michael becomes the new Omar, becoming a highly skilled and feared stick-up man. Dookie becomes the new Bubbles, forced onto the streets and falling into drug use with a group of homeless addicts, robbing people who care about him most, like Mr. Presbo, to fuel his addiction. Marlowe is a free man, but now stuck in stuffy meetings with wealthy businessmen and losing the prominence and power of his name on the street corners. Slim Charles murders Cheese for his betrayal of Prop Joe and works with the Reform Co-op to take over the drug supply from the Greeks. Kima reconciles and bonds with her young son while officially becoming Bunk's new partner in homicide. Lester peacefully retires, while the fired McNulty resolves to clean himself up for good. He returns the fake kidnapped homeless man to the streets he's used to, reconciles with Beatty, and admires the city of Baltimore, the place he calls home.